Hi class, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Chef Rosser and I'm going to be teaching RSTO1325 purchasing to you this semester. If you're watching this, I'm going to ask that if you have not yet watched the welcome back video, it's about a 5-minute introduction and we go over some important things in there as well. These video lectures are going to be uploaded weekly. I've had a little technical difficulty with these from time to time. I'm doing the best I can to make them available as much as possible for you guys. If there are any issues in the future with them, I will send out an announcement. Anyway, so before we get into the lecture notes for purchasing Unit 1, I want to bring up a few points for you guys. First of all, take a few minutes to watch that video like I suggested. Also, go through the syllabus that are in Blackboard, and they're on the left side menu, on the left hand menu of the home page of the class. When you open the class, it should open up into the announcements area, and there should be a menu bar on the left hand side. Click on syllabi, and in there's links to the part 1 of the syllabi, which is my expectations of you guys as students and the institution and program's expectations of you guys as students, and it's all pretty familiar stuff. There's the part 2, which is lays out what we're going to learn in this class, and it's also what your expectations should be of the class, myself, and the institution overall. And then there is an addendum to part 1. And in that addendum, it mentions some very specific things related to the transition to online classes during the COVID-19 orders by the college. And some of the important things that you guys as students need to know about that is that there will not be any function hours required during the summer semester. We will not be conducting the supplemental instruction courses or those SIs. We don't want to have that many groups in there. If this class purchasing will be entirely online, we will not have any face-to-face labs, so it will be conducted entirely online. All of the work is to be turned in through Blackboard. Please don't try to upload it into SharePoint or send me anything by email. I won't accept it and it won't be graded because the assignments as they're listed in Blackboard are tied into the grade, so it's a seamless transition. I don't have to hunt for something in an email box and try to give it a grade. So everything is done through Blackboard. You can communicate with me and other students through Blackboard. There's course messages and emails in there. You can select either of those to communicate with myself or other students. So also, we need to mention for purchasing, since it's an RSTO class, it is a project-based class. And we're going to talk more about the individual project assignments, but what I want to talk to you about right now is the overall project. There will be project assignments given to you every week. I'm not a big fan of homework outside of the project assignments because the project is a very large and comprehensive project. You are going to need to do a significant amount of work on your project over the course of the next 10 weeks. Please keep that in mind. You really should be spending anywhere between 6 and 10 hours a week on that project. That's an average. Students who do less tend to fall behind on their assignments, and when students have to fall behind on their assignments because there's so many and they're so large, they tend to not catch up and do poorly in the class, if not fail the class. So please keep up with your assignments. And I will go through the assignment for this week as well as the rest for this semester after the lecture notes. Okay, so if you have any questions, also I've put my contact information in the syllabi, and also in the some of the information for the class. My contact information is in there, including my cell phone. I want to make myself available to you guys. Anyway, so let's get into the lecture notes. This week in Unit 1, we're going to be talking about purchasing systems, distribution, and supplier selection But before we get into any of that, we need to talk about the concepts of value. So what is value, and how does that tie into purchasing? Well, value, and I have a big scientific definition here, and I'll go through that in a second. But value really means how you perceive the products that you're purchasing or the services that you're purchasing versus the money we pay. If we don't find value in a transaction, we're going to say it wasn't worth it, right? If you've ever felt ripped off or anything like that after you have an experience either in a restaurant or in a retail outlet, that you don't see the value in that situation. So value, and the scientific definition is value is a systematic study of the function of an item or system for the purpose of identifying unnecessary costs which can be eliminated without impairing the capacity of the item or system to perform as required. Really, it's about getting what you paid for and having a good feeling about it, right? So perceived value is what we need to go through next, and this is as it relates to a guest experience. So if I'm writing a menu, I need to look at the value as my guests will see it. So will the products and services sell, and at what price? So will the items that I'm putting on my menu, will they sell? And that's based upon the market, the demands, popularity, trends, whatever the case is. But if your customers don't find a value in the items that you're serving, they're not going to buy them. And then the next question that we need to ask with perceived value as far as guests is, will the products and services be available, and at what cost? If you have interruptions in your supply chain or items become too expensive, you're either going to absorb that cost or you're going to pass it along to your guests, and so that can be problematic down the road. The next question: what are the bottom line effects of selling these products and services? And that is a huge statement, because everything that we bring into a restaurant costs us money, right? So that affects our bottom line, and can we sell it at a price point where we can make that money back and hopefully have some profit left? And then the last question is, how can we maximize the value received by our property and the value perceived by our guests in the products and services that we offer for sale? So how can you maximize your profit and maximize the perceived value of the items that you're selling to your guests? And that's a really good question to ask yourself if you're in the food service business. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is a value proposition. Now, and this started in the 1990s. Food service companies started doing what was known as value-added services, and they were promoted by manufacturers and distributors who tried to differentiate themselves from the competition. So say if you bought 10 cases of hamburger patties, they would give you 10 cases of buns at half price, or a case of mustard and a case of ketchup. So that's a value proposition. Now, in looking at a proposition like that, you need to ask yourself a few questions. Well, yes, it's a bargain, but does it meet my quality standards as far as what my guests are expecting? If it's similar to what you're already using and the quality won't go down, why not give it a try? But if your guests aren't going to like it, the value is not there. All right. So next we're going to talk about goals of a purchasing program. So what is a purchasing program? That means that overall how we buy and pay for products that we're bringing into a restaurant in order to sell. So the first goal of that program is going to be to control costs. Pretty self-explanatory. We don't want to pay more than we absolutely need to. We need to look at volume of purchased products and services, because like I mentioned earlier, everything that we bring into the restaurant costs money. So we don't want to have too much of that on hand or too little of those products on hand. If we have too much, we have too much money tied up in inventory that is not liquid. We can't use it to pay bills or employees or whatever the case is. And if we have too little of a product on hand, we're running out, and that can affect cash flow negatively as well. And effect on cash flow is the next item, the next goal. We want to minimize the effect of purchasing on our cash flow, so that we are the most fluid that we can be, have the most money on hand, without running out of product, obviously. Having a proper supply of information is really important. The information that we receive from the industry, the market, our customers, and our suppliers is really important. All of those pieces of information we gather, and we synthesize that into purchasing decisions, whether it's about the seasonality of lettuce coming from California, or what our customers like and don't like. We need to have this information supply in order to make proper decisions. And then finally, continuity of supply. And that means that we're able to get the products that we need when we need them. So those are all good goals to have in your purchasing program. Next, we're going to talk about styles of purchasing. Some of these are really spot on, great for the restaurant industry, and some of them are not so much. So let's jump into these. The first style of purchasing is known as ride the market. And that's simply waiting until products are needed and then taking bids or negotiating with a single distributor to fulfill those purchase needs. So really, you're waiting till you need that product, whether it's a 50-pound bag of flour or number 10 cans of crushed tomatoes. When you get down to where it's time to order, then you talk with your suppliers, and you get that purchase made, bringing in at the time you need it. The next one is cost plus, and that's a simple percentage markup from a wholesale price. And this is, distributors will do this in order to create competitive pricing. So they will buy products on the wholesale market, and then they will mark up a certain percentage and then sell it to you. The problems that you can have with that is oftentimes many of these products may not meet your exact specification requirements. They may not be exactly what you need or are used to, but the value is there. You get if you have some flexibility in the requirements of your project or of your products, you can bring in something else at a lower cost, and that works fine. A good model for that is like Food King supermarkets. They operate on a cost plus basis, so they buy from their distributors and mark it up a percentage. That's why they can sell at such a reduced price. But if you've ever been into one of those stores, they don't always have everything available all the time, and the quality may not be that great. The next style of purchasing is buy and inventory. And this is typically used when a large supply of a product is required. A fixed quantity can be bought, shipped in, and you are responsible for storing and inventorying that. This is really not a great model to use for food products unless you have a ton of storage and don't mind sitting on a lot of product, but you also have to have a significant amount of cash flow in order to buy these products. The hotel that I used to work at in Las Vegas would do buy and inventory with things like toilet paper and paper towels. A couple times a year they would bring in multiple tractor trailer loads of paper towels and toilet paper and store them in their warehousing area, and they got a really good deal on that because they bypassed the middleman, the distributor. They went straight to the manufacturer. Great model if you got a lot of cash and you've got a lot of storage, but probably not so much for an independent restaurant. The next one is a long-term contract. This may be based on fixed pricing or accelerated pricing based on, it kind of fluctuates with the market, but they're usually very friendly as far as terms. If you sign a contract with a supplier, they're going to give you better terms. In order to be cost effective, prices should be forecast. You should be able to look down the road and say, in 6 months, is this product going to go up or down in price? But long-term contracts work great for restaurants because suppliers are more willing to give you price breaks if you say I'm only going to buy from you. And it's great for restaurants because you're only dealing with one supplier, making one order, writing one check. So long-term contract works great, and so does ride the market for independent restaurants and larger restaurants too, whether it's a chain or not. And then the last style of purchasing is known as hedging. It's also called forward contracting, and it is done in the futures market. So it's kind of a commodity buy. So you're buying certain things that will be on the market in the future. Things like oil, pork bellies, orange juice. There's all kinds of commodities. Wheat, rice, soybeans. Those are all commodities. And you're looking at what's going to be on the market in the next 3, 6, 12 months, and you're buying based upon kind of a price that is set by experts. If that price goes up, you will pay the same price, that you don't have to pay more. If the price goes down, you're stuck paying that price. So it's kind of a gamble, and not a very wise purchasing decision to make for an independent restaurant. If you're a really large restaurant chain like McDonald's, sure, you might buy beef on hedging. You might hedge your beef or have your own farm, whatever the case is. Next, we're going to talk about distribution for the food service industry. We need to talk a little bit about the history of distribution as it relates to the food service industry. And we're going to talk some about grocery stores too, because really restaurants piggybacked off of the grocery store distribution model. So in the 1920s and 30s, retail food distribution began. Excuse me. Before that, what the distribution model looked like was that people would buy locally, right? Around cities and towns, there would be farmers. They would bring their products into the market. You would go buy those, and pretty simple. But the selection and availability may not have been that good. But in the 1920s and 30s, after the 1900s, refrigerated train cars and refrigerated trucks and better warehousing came into play. So retail food distribution really took off at that time. And with that retail food distribution, large food chains started to pop up, grocery stores and distributors. Also, the small independent grocers banded together to have the same kind of model of food distribution. So they formed like a co-op, and they would bring products into a central warehousing and ship it out to the members of those cooperatives. And that's how small independent grocers really stayed in business for as long as they did. And that was the Coalition of Independent Grocers. In the 1950s, the National Institutional Food Distribution Associates, known as NIFTA, came into being. And what they were tasked with doing was setting up better distribution throughout the country for institutional food service, whether it was grocery stores, hospitals, restaurants, schools, whatever the case was. So it was a bigger, better distribution model with wide-ranging membership. Also in the 1950s, fast food became popular. So and the advent of fast food and really the franchises that sprang up from that brought a lot to the distribution of food service, because these single restaurants would have their own distribution networks, and they still do. You see trucks out there with McDonald's and Wendy's all over them, because they're supplying their own restaurants from their own warehousing. They have their own systems. So that development was huge in the food service industry, and is still important today. And speaking of today, there's several models of distribution. So there's the large national or regional brands with broad product lines, serving a wide range of customers. And if you look at that statement, things like Cisco and U.S. Foods fit perfectly into that model. They're large national or international brands. And they have very wide product lines. You can get everything from dry spices to fresh fish and produce, whatever the case is, from them, and they serve a lot of different restaurants. There are also large national or regional operations with relatively narrow product lines that serve specific customers and market segments. And a good example of that is some of the Hispanic food brands that are a little more focused on very kind of narrow spectrum of food products, and they do great business as well. There are distribution companies which are owned or directed by large hospitality companies. In some cases, these firms sell to companies outside of their owner's organization, and a lot of restaurants will do that, whether it's McDonald's or Carino's. They have their own distribution networks and they will sell to other restaurants. There are commissary systems, which are used by regional chain restaurants and companies to distribute items, ranging from basic commodities to ready-to-use products, and they're typically used in their own restaurants or their own organizations. And they're large restaurant groups. If they may have 20 different types of outlets, steakhouses, hamburger joints, seafood joints, they all use these large commissary systems where the restaurants will order what they need from their own distributors. There's local independent full-line distributors, and these are fewer and fewer because they're getting bought up by the big companies. And there are local specialized distributors, and that's mainly produce or seafood. And these local specialized distributors have a great share of the market because they build relationships on the local level, and they're able to really satisfy their customers' needs. And it's all relationship based. Okay, so next we're going to talk about supplier selection. So who's going to be the right company to buy from for your particular restaurant? It's not always the person with the lowest prices. There's so many factors in selecting someone that you're going to purchase from because you're really building a professional relationship. So a lot of the purchasing decisions that are made are based on quality of the product and quantity, how much you're buying. But it's also about getting the right product at the right price at the right time from the right supplier. So that's all of these questions really need to be asked, but quality and quantity are probably the two first ones. Volume of purchased products or services have an effect on cash flow. We've mentioned that several times, and because of that, businesses should be doing regular inventories. And what's an inventory? Well, you're counting what you have in stock to see how much money you have tied up in product. Oftentimes businesses that don't take inventory have mountains of product that they're not moving. It's either in a freezer, in a dry storage room, and it's just sitting there, and every item in there represents money. So if they're not taking a regular inventory and trying to do something with that product, either move it or get rid of it if it's no good, they have a lot of money tied up there. So that will have a definite effect on your purchasing abilities. So there's two types of inventories that you can take: periodic, and you're going to do that weekly, monthly, sometimes even daily for small items, or yearly, whatever the case is. And that's where you physically go in and count everything, and you everything's written down, and then that's all calculated to see how much money you have tied up in inventory. There's also a perpetual inventory, and these are for larger places that have more products. And a good example of that is a grocery store. Every time something scans at a grocery store, the computer says, okay, we have one less bottle of ketchup, and at some point that adds up, and then the computer will flag to the manager and say, hey, it's time to buy ketchup. So that's a perpetual inventory. So inventory systems are set up and used to determine when food products should be purchased in order to meet the standards of the customer. What we need to talk about is PARs, P-A-R-S. PARs are levels of product that we need to have on hand to conduct regular business between ordering cycles. So if a restaurant uses 5 bags of flour a week to make bread and pastries, once you get down to 2 or 3, it's time to order more. So you would keep an eye on that, and there's usually a cushion on there. So they may, if they use 5 a week, their par should probably be 6 or 7 in case they get heavy business and have to use more than they expect. So pars are just those numbers of products that you want to have on hand to conduct business in between orders. So every item that you have in stock that you're using regularly, you should have a par on that. All right. So pars may vary from day to day. Excuse me, grab something to drink. Weekends are busier than weekdays, so you're going to go through more product on weekends than you would on a weekday. That makes sense. That you're going to use more products when you're busier. And they're based. That determination is based on historical data, whether it's day by day or seasonally. If you live in a beach town, you know that your summer months are going to be busier than your winter months. So that's the historical data, and that all comes from your sales. If pars are set to only the busiest day of the week, cash flow is lessened, and oftentimes food spoilage is common. So you need to really be able to adjust your pars on something like flour, where it's relatively stable. It's not going to change so much other than seasonally. You're not going to say, well, we're using 5 bags of flour one day and 2 the next. If you have those 7 on hand, you should be fine in between orders. However, in the winter, if your business drops by 50%, you're probably not going to keep 7 bags of flour on hand at any time. Okay. So next we need to talk about quality standards for food safety and costs. A good supplier, this is what we're looking for out of suppliers, must have the capability and the commitment to perform well. The supplier must provide timely information regarding price changes, thus maintain a competitive price level. The supplier must be able to consistently provide the proper quantity and quality of products. The supplier must have an ongoing interest in improving products and services provided to your hospitality operation. The supplier must understand the market served by the operation and must have ideas about how to best meet the needs of that market, including special services. Supplier must inform buyers as to new or improved products which may be applicable to their operation. The supplier must be professional. It should be easy to follow up on problems, resolve difficulties that arise, and to negotiate concerns. The supplier must be concerned that their facilities meet or exceed accepted levels of sanitation, and I always recommend taking a trip to your supplier's distribution warehouse and inspect their trucks when you get deliveries. The supplier must be financially capable of growing with both the industry and its customers. And all of these things that I just mentioned are really about forming and building that professional relationship. So how to identify supplier sources? This is where you can find suppliers. So previous experiences, a lot of people in the restaurant industry have worked other jobs, and they know people in the industry, or they know of companies out there. Sales representatives, every time a new restaurant opens, the sales representatives are going to come try to talk to you, and so you can hear them out and see what they have to offer. Written information, and a lot of times it's online, or they will send you letters. Trade publications, whether it's food magazines, whatever the case is. Trade shows, exhibits, and conventions are really great places to meet these people and find out what they have to offer. Competitors. This is one of my favorite ways of finding suppliers. Competition in the market is a great thing. I've had very few instances where I've talked to a competitor and they were jerks. More often than not, guys in the restaurant industry really look out for each other. Doesn't matter if you're right next door to each other and you're fierce cutthroat competitors. You should still look out for each other. And some of the best professional relationships I've ever had are from competitors, and they will bend over backwards usually to help you, because the more the merrier. Unless you're a jerk, they probably aren't going to be. And then also references. You can get references on suppliers from a lot of different places. Usually their existing customers is the best place to go for that. All right. Additional factors that we want to look at when selecting suppliers are their facilities. I briefly mentioned that when I said you need to check out their facilities, look at their sanitation levels, look at how they conduct themselves. If you're getting damaged products all the time, you may want to have that conversation with your sales rep to say, hey, can I come look around because I keep getting damaged products, or find out for yourself. It may be a driver, it may be the trucks, it may be the warehouse facility. So it helps to do your footwork. Also the technical capability of the staff, especially with the advent of all the technology that we're using for purchasing. If your suppliers have the technical capability and are using it fully, it's going to benefit everybody. The business relationship, again, how is that business relationship? If it gets soured, you can always ask for a different sales rep. You can start looking for another company. If you're in a contract, you can still you still have room to negotiate, especially if you feel like you're getting bad service and that business relationship isn't what it should be. Supplier sources should weigh heavily on your decision, especially with the farm to fork movement. People want to know where their products come from, and your supplier should freely tell you, hey, these tomatoes came from Yuma, Arizona, whatever farm. They have that information, and if they're not giving it to you, you need to really reconsider that relationship. You should include some of the following questions when talking about your supplier sources. One, where does the supplier source and various foods come from? Where is this food coming from? Can you visit the supplier's source? How is the food raised? Either produce or animals. Is it organic? Is it free range? How is it raised and produced? Who processes the food? Whether it's simple processing or more complicated processing, who does that work for them? Because it's not always listed on the packaging. What steps are taken to ensure safe food handling procedures? That's a really important one, especially if you've seen the recalls that come out in the food service industry, whether it's on the grocery level or in the food service sector. And then also, how long does it take for the food to get from the producer or grower to the supplier, and then from the supplier to you? So there's a lot to be considered in the selection of suppliers, okay? And we're going to stop with the lecture notes right there. Next, we're going to talk about the project assignments. So a quick overview of the project. Throughout the semester, you're going to ask to do several things. You're going to create a purchasing system for your chosen establishment. You're going to develop a supplier list, and you're also going to develop a master ingredient list. You're going to create purchase requisitions. You're going to create a startup budget. You're going to develop receiving and storage procedures. You're going to conduct product yields and purchase quantities. You're going to do a competitive bid analysis between suppliers. You're going to do inventory list and par levels, and that's part of your master ingredient list. And you're also going to do a capital equipment purchase order. All right, so you're going to do an equipment list. So project assignment number 1, which is going to be partially due next week, and we'll talk about that in just a second, is to create a menu with both sweet and savory items. If you're a culinary major, you need to have at least one sweet category, and if you're a pastry major, you need to have at least one savory category. So you need to have 5 categories with at least 5 categories with at least 3 items in each category. So what are the categories you're going to have? Well, some typical ones are appetizers, soup, salad, entrees, desserts. Those are those are the typical menu categories, and you need to put 3 items in each of those categories. If it's a bakery, maybe you want to have one of your categories is plated desserts, maybe one is cakes, pies, tarts, donuts, whatever. And we'll talk about that more later, but really what I'm looking for you guys for next week is just that basic menu, okay? We're going to have an extra credit at the for the entire project, and that is if you create a beverage category. And now for that beverage category, you need to have at least I think I wrote at least 5 beers, 5 wines, 3 specialty cocktails, and 3 non-alcoholic drinks. So, and those 3 non-alcoholic drinks can't be coffee, tea, and Coke. They need to be something that you're making that you can write a recipe for. And then the beer and wine selections need to be a good mix. And if you have more questions about that, let me know and I'll answer those. So that is part of the first part of project assignment number 1. The second part is to create your master ingredient list. And that master ingredient list is a list of every single ingredient that you're going to need to make all of your menu items. Includes salt, pepper, flour, butter, oil, everything start to finish. And that master ingredient list is going to be what you use to make everything, and it's going to be based on your recipes, which is the third part of the project assignment number 1, is to create standardized recipes and cost cards that correspond to each of your menu items. And don't forget the sub recipes. So if you're making a hamburger, and you're making the buns for the hamburger too, that's a sub recipe. So I expect to have you turn in the menu by next week, and then by week 5 you're going to turn in your master ingredient list along with your standardized recipes and your cost cards as part of project assignment number 1. Now that's a really big assignment, but it is the cornerstone of your entire project, so I'm giving that out the first week. Only the first part is due next week. The rest of it you have 4 more weeks to work on. All right, so project assignment number 2, and these are by week as well. So week 1 is project assignment number 1, which we just went over. Week 2, project assignment number 2, and that's create a purchasing system for your chosen establishment. And I will give more details. I don't want to overload you with the details of each of these. However, this document is in the Blackboard for you guys to check out. So project assignment number 2, create a purchasing system for your establishment and develop your supplier list. Project assignment number 3, create a purchasing requisition for all food and non-food items. Assignment number 4, develop procedures for receiving and storage. Number 5, apply what you learned about product yields. So you're going to do yield testing, and we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. So you're going to do yield testing. And number 6 is you're going to create an ordering guide, and that's going to be based on your master ingredient list. And you're going to take one recipe from your packet and do a competitive bid analysis. And number 7, create a startup budget, and that looks at how much money you need to start a restaurant. And then number 8, you're going to create a purchase order for the capital equipment investment of your restaurant, and you're also going to create a bank proposal to get a loan for your restaurant. So those are the 8 project assignments. Yes, this semester is 10 weeks, but I want to give you 1 week to tie everything together, and then on week 9, you're going to give your project presentation to the entire class. So that's going to be a 10-minute PowerPoint slideshow or video presentation that you're going to upload for everybody, or we'll figure that out later. I'm still trying to figure out the application we're going to use. And the project checklist is part of the project assignment list as well, which is all available on Blackboard for you guys. All right, so remember, we're going to start having weekly class meetings on week 2, and I will send out an announcement with that information later on in the week. Thanks for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you guys.